So for those of us who are joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those who are returning, welcome, and so glad to see you here again. Just briefly, for those who are joining for the first time, let me give you a quick rundown for the meditation. So what we'll do first is briefly take a look at the work of art, allow it to sink in, and then afterwards, it will be followed by the meditation. And after that, we will learn a little bit about the artwork, the artist, and open up a forum and welcoming reflections, feedback, or questions that you may have. So that will be a little bit of the structure. Without further ado, let's take a brief look at the artwork. So let's begin by allowing your eyes to just wander and just see where they take you. Are there aspects of this artwork that resonate with you? Does it remind you of anything? Does it bring up any memories? Does it bring up any feelings or sensations? Are there any particular color that resonates with you the most? And do you notice any feelings that come with certain colors? And let's stay here for just a minute. Let's now transition into our guided meditation called Autumn Forest. So to begin, let's find a relaxed position, just a comfortable position. It could be a chair, a couch, or even the floor. Just any place that can hold you and allow you to relax. And when you're there, and if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. And focus your attention on your breathing. Follow the cool air going in and the warm air coming out. And just notice if your breath is shallow or deep. Not attempting to change it, just to notice. Being curious if your breath is fast or slow, just noticing its quality. There's nothing you need to do right now, nowhere else you need to be. with each breath you take, allow yourself to be more relaxed and more comfortable. I want you to imagine that you're walking down the path in a lush autumn forest. Paint the forest in your mind and place yourself into this pleasantly cool and calming forest. You feel lighter than air, almost as if you're floating as you stroll down the path, becoming immersed in the sights, sounds, and smells of the forest. It's peaceful, quiet, beautiful. Majestic oak, maple, and chestnut trees tower above your head, forming a canopy of leaves painted with bright, brilliant colors of fall. Picture the colors in your mind's eye: deep reds, cheerful yellows, soothing oranges, peaceful greens, comforting golden browns. Pause for a moment and notice rays of sunlight peek through the canopy of autumn leaves and fall down on the forest floor, creating an inspiring dance of light and shadow each time the gentle wind blows. As you walk through this graceful dance of sun and shade on the forest floor, you feel more and more relaxed and at peace. With each breath you take, you feel a deep sense of peace and tranquility. Up ahead, you see the forest open into a clearing. The forest path leads you to a small meadow filled with yellow and white flowers. The meadow is surrounded by majestic trees. It's peaceful, safe, beautiful place. The flowers are gently waving in the breeze. Slowly, you drift through the beautiful blossoms, feeling the warm sun on your face, shoulders, and back. Stop for a moment and soak in the relaxing warmth of the gentle sun. As the bright lights fall on your face, you absorb some of their positive energy. pause and look up and admire the contrast of colors around the dark blue sky. As you breathe in the sights, sounds, and smells around you, the wind blows through the trees, causing their colorful leaves to cascade down in front of you. This is your place where you can allow your worries to be carried away by the wind. It's a place where you can re-energize from the solar energy. This is your safe and peaceful place. It's a place you can visit as often as you like. Continue to admire your surroundings and stay here for one more minute. As we begin to return to the present moment, capture in your mind this moment of peacefulness and relaxation. Allow it to exist in your mind, to be retrieved when you need a break in the day. And gradually come back to the present moment, continuing to keep the feeling of relaxation. Just feel the surface beneath you, becoming more and more aware and alert. And wiggle your fingers and toes, feeling your body reawaken. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And allow yourself to stretch if you need to. Bringing more movement to your body. If you need to get a drink of water, please do so. And now that we are back, let's take another moment and look at the artwork and see if you notice anything different. See if you notice any new memories or thoughts. Are there any feelings that come up for you? And at this point, we're going to open up for anyone who would like to share, whether it be unmuting or if you would like, you can also write in the chat.
There's a comment in the chat that reads, "The tiny trees are new to me, and the tiny animals." Noticing those smaller details that maybe we weren't drawn to before the meditation. Absolutely.
At first, for me, the deer looked like they were running or jumping, but now they look like they're laying down rather than running through.
There's another comment that reads, "I didn't notice the darker border before." I actually hadn't either for all the times I've looked at this work. Your eyes being more drawn to the details. I wonder if, as Libni had introduced in the start, if you're being drawn to any new colors that maybe you didn't pick up on at first. There are more comments in the chat that read, "At the base of the large trees, there is a green disc which is darker at the left and lighter at the right." So noticing that there's some amount of light coming in, maybe seeing some shadow in that spot. Someone else writes, "Sorry, I have to leave early. I'd love to hear the chat about this piece. I love its rhythm, the pairs versus the triplets, the movement versus the stillness, the mysteries. I really like that duality you're pulling out." And earlier in the chat, there was a comment about how everything is in twos and threes, with only one animal looking at us. It sounds like you're picking up some similar things. The symmetry is comforting, organization, order, yet the ethereal quality of the foliage is graceful and calming. I'm noticing this through theme of this sort of on one hand, very tranquil scene, on the other, the lines are very defined. And there's a sense of symmetry, maybe even flatness, that sort of juxtapose each other. I wonder if when we're thinking about the sereneness of this scene, is there anything in particular that gives you that feeling? Whether it's a color, maybe one of the animals, or the trees. Where do you find that stillness? There's a comment that reads, "It's hard not to notice the skunks." Then the deer or antelope suggests movement on one hand, but also stillness. Other than the very straight trees, they're all curvy shapes. And there's a heart shape on the right tree. It has gradually appeared left to right. The tree shapes are two soft hand shapes. Pastel colors are soothing. The symmetry is not exact, which makes it more dynamic. There's a organicness I'm hearing with all these through lines. Want to turn now to the title and see how that might change your reflection with this work. It's an artwork by the artist Pop Chalee, a Taos Pueblo artist who lived from 1906 to 1993. And she titled this work Untitled, in parentheses, forest scene. I wonder if looking at this artwork and compared to our own meditation walking through a forest scene, did you envision something similar to this artwork? Or if it was different, maybe how does that bring you back to the work of art? Or I'll introduce it with a little context as well. This artist makes a series of forest scenes, and what we're noticing, the deer with the elongated stretched legs, the animals in these very wavy organic shapes in the trees are really consistent throughout. And I've heard words about it being whimsical or ethereal. And with these works of art, she's pulling from a lot of myths. There's a comment in the chat that reads, "My forest was the redwood, so very different from this artwork. I thought the work was Asian, so very interested in the origins." Absolutely. And I can see how those connections might be made. With Asian works of art, there's a very flat perspective that we also have here. Not necessarily shading, not as many dimensions. So let's turn to the artist for a moment. This is Pop Chalee. On the left, she's working on one of these highly detailed works. And on the right, showing how she would often compose her works, which was outside in nature. Her name actually means blue flower, Tiwa, the language of where she comes from in New Mexico. And she was really interested in the natural world. I had mentioned that some of that ethereal quality comes from her interest in myths. And what she shares is that One of her favorite things from childhood was her grandfather's stories. There is particularly one of a mythic horse, which I'll show in just a minute. But these stories centered around animals and forest scenes that were just magical. And Chalee says about her own work that my painting style is flat and simple, leaving things out that are not important, but making a beautiful picture. End quote. Thinking about what she says with flat and simplicity, leaving out what's not important, I wonder how that affects your feeling of this scene. If you imagine yourself in this artwork rather than a natural forestscape, do you find it to be more peaceful? Or other emotions that this might bring up? With the last comment as well, there was a question about the origins. And this artist, in addition to her influences of her family's stories and those mythical qualities, was her training. She was trained in what's called the studio style at the Santa Fe School. And the studio style refers to a painting technique that uses flat, bold blocks of color with little to no detail. So her background is in that flatness that we see in this work. But rather than these blocks of color, she has these very fine details. And we can see those a little closer here.
Mhm.
Creating the leaves, the hair of the animals, the other foliage with these very precise lines. She had spent much of her free time in the densely wooded mountains of Taos as well, so drawing from the natural scenes around her. I'm curious about what we think of the high level of detail in this work. Does it draw you in more or give you a different sense of the art? Particularly thinking how her mentors weren't working in detail, while they focused on blocks of color.
For me, if I can add, Ellis, as I continue to look at the artwork, sometimes when I've seen artwork in the past, it can be a little overwhelming, but it does feel very intentional, and it makes me feel much more focused in appreciating the detail, including the seeing the animals. And so it brings a sense of soothing, I guess, uh, to be able to focus on something so intently, and because it's so nothing is it's simple. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And the artist herself references how she wants to focus on details that we might miss in everyday life. There are more comments in the chat that I'll read through briefly. That this could be a work of printmaking, perhaps noticing the precision of the lines in relation to the print medium, that the detail is enriching. Another comment that says, yes, I'm drawn in to look for more than there is. And the figures are tiny, so I must enlarge to see the details. And then a question about the medium. The medium of this work is tempera on paper, so painting on paper. I appreciate the details and the close-ups. The bits of grass pull me in, reads another chat.
Yeah.
So thinking about the detail in this work as a painting, the way she achieved that was she would actually paint with a single horsehair on a brush, using the most painstaking tiny lines to create this work.
Oh my gosh.
That's really evident in this other work of hers, titled The Mythical Horse, which speaks more directly to the myths that she learned from her grandfather. This one in particular, her grandson, describes with the horse being depicted with silken hair, or as if on a cloud, trying to capture that very mythical, magical quality. Another question reads, I'm curious to know how large this piece of artwork is, and it's roughly about 2 feet by about 1.5 feet. So it's
Also,
not
it's
terribly
small.
large. Yeah. And I'm going to show another work of hers. But these works were made on a much larger scale. She was commissioned to make murals for the airport in Albuquerque and was actually the artist who created the most at that airport. She has 10 works. This is just a sample of them. But they were on a massive scale, some stretching as long as 16 feet. And yet even the hairs coming off the horses, she would make with that same single hair brush. I know for myself, when I can imagine her going through that, it seems like such a meditative process. And I wonder if others are having reactions to knowing how long she would take with it in that precision.
Oh, yeah. Did she say, Alice, how long it would take?
I know that her grandson, who is very close to her and is her main scholar, has written that some would take months for a single work, but not necessarily specify which one. For this project, in fact, the murals, which were made in 1945, the airport reached out to the grandson in 1985, asking if he can restore them. In fact, at the time, he wrote back saying the artist is still alive, much to their
Oh,
surprise. So she was able to restore them in person, but her relationship with her grandson was very close. I'm going to turn to a quote from him. While we don't have much writing from the artist herself, her grandson has, in fact, done some work to restore some of her other works of art. He has also curated an exhibition, her first solo exhibition of work. And here's what he says about watching her. Quote, I used to sit and watch her painting for hours. If you look at one of her mythical horses, the mane and the tail look like silk. Each one of those hairs that come off the mane and the tail is made with a brush that only had one hair. She would sit for hours painting one hair at a time. The mane and tail almost looked like clouds. I think she did that because the horse that flew over the pueblo was obviously flying in the clouds.
wow.
And I'll also share in our final minute or two here that what I find really special is the artist's connection to nature, not just spending most of her time in the forest painting outside, but she was also quite an accomplished horse rider. The exhibition was actually called Yippee Pop Chalee, because she was awarded by the Association of Cowgirls with an award posthumously. So drawing those connections between her depictions of everything that she is seeing and experiencing in the world. I'm going to bring us back to the artwork and open up for any final reflections or questions.
Do have one question, Ellis. I go to the Albuquerque airport at least once a year because my brother lives in Albuquerque. Do you know if the artwork is still there at the airport?
It is to my knowledge. I know that I'm going to go back briefly. The long one of the horses at the top, that is over what used to be a bar in the airport, one of the first rooms built. And I think that room has since been renovated, but the mural has been left. The airport actually lists all the locations of these, and she is the only artist that is in almost every location. She's the most widespread
Oh,
artist and has the most works there. So now you'll have to keep an eye out for them.
for sure.
There's a comment in the chat that reads, it would be interesting to know if the leaves she paints are symbolic of a real species. It's a really great question. Let's look at those trees and the leaves again. And I can't speak to that exactly. I know that the waviness of the branches, those organic forms, are really consistent even in her works that aren't of trees. So my assumption would be that the shape is more focusing on a feeling, on a quality, rather than specific species. But I will have to look into that. Are there any other final questions or reflections? And please feel free to unmute as well.
Now, I've been to Albuquerque and I've been to Taos as well. And so kind of noticing remembering some of the landscape, and it's not like a super lush forest, but it's like a mixture because it's somewhat desert. And seeing the trees now, I recognize uh, some of what I remember in my visits there. What I don't see though are cacti, which I don't know if at the very corner of the bottoms, if that's supposed to be a resemblance of cacti, although they look more like pine trees.
Yeah, I can just say to that, I haven't seen cacti in her work.
Yeah.
It's much more of the trees we might see in Ohio.
Mhm.
But thank you all for your reflections. I want to be mindful of time. We're just a few minutes past. So feel free, if there are lingering questions, to send them in an email after the session. And we hope to see you at our next session.
Thank you, everyone.